I fell in love with Anthony Rocella, and I'm not going to dilly-dally around, pretending that I didn't. And he fell in love with me too, in his own way, and for a little while at least. Best of all, I managed to fall in love with him within the space of just a few hours, which is a model of efficiency. The young can do that kind of thing, as you must know, without difficulty. In fact, passionate love, executed in short bursts, is the natural condition of the young. The only surprising thing was that it hadn't happened to me sooner. The secret to falling in love so fast, of course, is not to know the person at all. You just need to identify one exciting feature about them, and then you hurl your heart at that one feature with full force, trusting that this will be enough of a foundation for a lasting devotion. And for me, the exciting thing about Anthony was his arrogance. I wasn't the only one who noticed it, of course. That cockiness was how he got cast in our play after all, but I was the one who fell in love with it. Now, I'd been around plenty of arrogant young men since arriving in town a few months earlier. It was New York City, Angela. We breed them here. But Anthony's arrogance had a special twist to it. He genuinely didn't seem to care. All the cocky boys I'd met thus far liked to play at nonchalance, but they still had an air about them of wanting something, even if it was only sex. But Anthony had no apparent hunger or longing about him. He was fine with whatever transpired. He could win, he could lose. It didn't shake him up. If he didn't get what he wanted out of a situation, he would just stroll away with his hands in his pocket, unfazed, and try again somewhere else. Whatever life offered, he could take it or leave it. He could even take it or leave it when it came to me. So, as you can imagine, I had no choice but to become completely smitten with him. Anthony lived in an apartment with his brother, Lorenzo. His mom and pop used to live in that apartment too, he told me, but they were both dead now, a fact that Anthony relayed to me with no evident sense of sorrow. I certainly came to know that apartment awfully well, and I remember it with warm fondness because it was in his brother, Lorenzo's bed, that I experienced my first climax. I've mentioned before that a woman needs time and patience and an attentive lover in order to get good at sex. Falling for Anthony Rocella finally gave me access to all three of those necessary features. Anthony and I found our way to Lorenzo's bed on the first night of our acquaintance. After the auditions were over, he'd come upstairs to sign a contract and to get a copy of the script from Billy. The adults all conducted their business, and then Anthony left. But only a few minutes after he'd walked out, Peg instructed me to run after him and speak to the young man about costumes. I snapped right to duty. Yes, ma'am. I'd never flown down the Lily's stairwell faster. I caught up with Anthony on the sidewalk, grabbed him by the arm, and breathlessly introduced myself. In truth, there wasn't much I needed to discuss with him. The suit he had worn to his audition would be perfect for his costume. Yes, it was a bit modern for our play, but with the right suspenders and a wide garnish tie, it would do the trick. It looked just cheap enough and just cute enough to suit Lucky Bobby, and while it might not have been the most politic thing for me to say, I told Anthony that his existing suit would be perfect for the role. Precisely because it was so cheap and so cute. You calling me cheap and cute? He asked, his eyes crinkling in amusement. He had highly pleasant eyes, dark brown and lively. He looked like he spent most of his life amused. Examining him closely, I could see he was older than he looked on stage. Less of a rangy kid and more of a lean young man. He was more like 29 than 19. It's just that his skinniness and his carefree step made him seem a lot younger. I might be, I said. But there's nothing wrong with cheap and cute. You, on the other hand, you look expensive, he said, and gave me a slow appraisal. But cute? I asked. Very. We stared at each other for a while. There was a good deal of information conveyed across the silence. A whole conversation, you might say. This is what flirtation is in its purest form. A conversation held without words. Flirtation is a series of silent questions that one person asks another person with their eyes, and the answer to those questions is always the same word. Maybe. So Anthony and I just looked at each other for a good long while, asking the unspoken questions and silently replying to each other. Maybe, maybe, maybe. The silence went on so long that it became uncomfortable. In my stubbornness, though, I wouldn't speak, but nor would break eye contact. Finally, he started laughing, and I laughed too. "What's your name, baby doll?" he asked. "Vivian Morris." "You free tonight to spend some time with me, Vivian Morris?" "Maybe," I said. "Yes?" he asked. I shrugged. He tilted his head and looked at me closer, still smiling. "Yes?" he asked again. "Yes," I decided, and that was the end of the maybe. But then he asked it again. "Yes?" "Yes," I said, thinking perhaps he hadn't heard me. "Yes," he said one more time, and now I realized that he was asking me about something else here. We weren't talking about going out for dinner and a movie. He was asking me if I was really free tonight. In an entirely different tone, I said, "Yes." Within a half hour, we were in his brother's bed. I knew instantly that this was not going to be the same sort of sexual experience to which I was accustomed. First of all, I wasn't drunk, and neither was he. And we weren't standing up in the cloakroom of a nightclub or fumbling in the back of a cab. There was no fumbling to be had here. Anthony Rocella was not in a hurry, and he liked to talk as he worked, but not in a horrible way like Dr. Kellogg. He liked to ask me playful questions, which I loved. I think he just liked to hear me say yes again and again, and I was more than happy to oblige. "You know how pretty you are, don't you?" he asked, once he had locked the door behind us. "Yes," I said. "You're gonna come sit on this bed with me now, right?" "Yes." "You know I'm gonna have to kiss you now, 'cause of how pretty you are." "Yes." And sweet mercy could that boy kiss. One hand on each side of my face, with his long fingers reaching behind my skull, holding me still while he softly tested out my mouth. This part of sex, the kissing part, which I always loved, was usually over far too quickly in my experience. But Anthony didn't seem to be heading towards something more. This was the first time I'd been kissed by somebody who was getting as much pleasure out of kissing as I was. After a long time, a very good long time, he pulled back. "Here's what we're gonna do now, Vivian Morris. I'm gonna sit there on this bed, and you're gonna stand right there under the light and take your dress off for me." "Yes," I said. Once you start saying it, it's so easy to keep going. I walked to the center of the room and stood, just as instructed, right under the light bulb. I took my dress off and stepped out of it, covering up my nervousness by throwing up my hands in the air. Ta-da! As soon as my dress came off, though, Anthony started laughing, and I was catapulted into shame, thinking of how thin I was and how small my breasts were. When he saw the look on my face, he softened his laughter and said, "Oh no, doll, I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing because I like you so much. You're a fast little operator and it's cute." He stood up, picked up my dress off the floor. "Why don't you put this dress back on, doll?" "Oh, I'm sorry," I said. "That's all right. I don't mind. I was making no sense, but I was thinking, I blew it. It's over. No, listen to me, baby. You're gonna put this dress back on for me, and then I'll ask you to take it off again for me. But this time, you're gonna slow it way down, okay? Don't be such a fast worker. You're crazy. I just want to see you do it again. Come on, doll. I've been waiting for this moment for my whole life. Don't rush it. No, you have not been waiting for this moment your whole life. He grinned. Nah, you're right. I haven't. But I sure do like it now that it's here. So how about you give it to me again, but real slow. He sat back down on the bed and I put my dress on. I came over and let him do up the buttons in the back, which he did, slowly and carefully. I could have reached the buttons myself, of course, and in just a few moments I would be unbuttoning them all over again, but I wanted to give him the task. Honestly, the experience of feeling this young man buttoning my dress was the most erotic and intimate sensation I'd ever experienced, although it was soon to be surpassed. I turned around and went back to the center of the room, fully dressed again. I fluffed my hair a bit. We were smiling at each other like fools. Now try it again, he said. Go real slow for me. Make like I'm not even here. This was my first experience of being watched. And while I had plenty of men put their hands all over me in the past few months, I had not had nearly enough of them appraise me with their eyes. I turned my back to him, as if I were shy. Truthfully, I was a bit shy. I had never felt quite so nude, and I was still clothed. I reached back and unbuttoned the dress. I allowed it to drop from my shoulders, but it caught around my waist. I left it there. I unhooked my bra and slid it over my arms. I placed it on the chair next to me. Then I just stood there and let him look at my naked body. I could feel him looking at me, and it was like a current running up my spine. I stood there for a long time, waiting for him to say something, but he didn't speak. There was something thrilling about my not being able to see his face, not knowing what he was doing behind me on the bed. To this day, I can still feel the quality of air in the room, that cool, fresh autumn air. Slowly I turned around, but kept my eyes down. My dress was still gathered loosely about my waist, but my breasts were bare. Still, he said nothing. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to be inspected and contemplated. The voltage I'd felt running up my spine had now circled out to the front of me. My head felt light and spinny. The prospect of moving or speaking seemed impossible. That's right, he said finally. That's what I'm talking about. Now you can come over here next to me. He guided me down onto the bed and pushed my hair back away from my eyes. I expected him to more or less attack my breasts and mouth at this point, but he didn't go near them. His lack of urgency was driving me a bit wild. He didn't even kiss me again. He just smiled at me. Hey Vivian Morris, I've got a big idea. You wanna hear? Yes. So, here's what we're gonna do now. You're gonna lay back on this bed and let me take off the rest of your clothes. And then you're gonna shut your pretty little eyes. And then you know what I'm gonna do. No, I said. I'm gonna show you what's what. His mouth had ended up between my legs so fast, and the sudden realization of this destination and his intent had shocked me to the point that I said, "Oh," and started to sit up. But he reached up one of his long arms, placed his palm on my chest, and firmly pressed me back down again, without once stopping what he was doing. "Oh," I said again. Then I felt it. There was a sensation occurring here that I didn't even know could occur. I took the sharpest inhale of my life, and I'm not sure I let my breath out for another 10 minutes. I do feel that I lost the ability to see and hear for a while, and that something might have short-circuited in my brain, something that has probably never been fully fixed since. My whole being was astonished. I could hear myself making noises like an animal, and my legs were shaking uncontrollably. Not that I was trying to control them. And my hands were gripping down so hard over my face that I left fingernail divots in my own skull. Then it became more, and after that it became even more still. Then I screamed as though I was being run over by a train, and that long arm of his was reaching up again to palm my mouth, and I bit into his hand the way a wounded soldier bites a bullet. And then it was the most, and I more or less died. When it was all over, I was panting and crying and laughing and could not stop shuddering. But Anthony Rocella just smiled that same cocky smile as ever. "Yeah, baby," said the skinny young man whom I now loved with all my heart. "That's what's what." Well, a girl is never really the same after something like that now, is she?